morning all, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon when you are watching this video. For those of you I have not yet met, my name is Cindy Gallagher. I am the Director of Government Relations here at SAANYS. And what we wanted to do is start a periodic videos of either items from the Board of Regents or bills in the legislature that we think you would might be interested in, as well as being timely. So our first video is going to summarize, if you can summarize a two-day meeting with the Board of Regents, some item actions and some discussions that happened on Monday and Tuesday, the 14th and 15th, for their Board of Regents January meeting. The first topic that I want to bring to your attention is in regard to substitute teachers. The Board of Regents have certainly understood and have heard many of our administrators indicate that there was such a shortage of substitutes that it was getting very, very difficult to be able to fill classrooms, especially in high need times of the year. So even as far back as 2016, the Regents began to look at this issue. And in fact, they did in 2016 rather, extend the 40-day limit for teachers who are, for people who didn't have a certificate, extended the 40-day limit to 90 days. The problem with that is that that piece of legislation or regulation sunset in May of 2018, which caused them to have to go back last May to re-look at the issue with a new board, by the way. So in that discussion, some of the regents were very uncomfortable with the idea that with a minimum level of education being a high school diploma, that a person could provide services as a substitute teacher for up to 90 days. And that was the point of discussion, and a consensus was not reached. So this week on Monday, the department came back with other options, and want to show you that item in particular. So you're going to see in the top grid what was current. And you're going to see that a person without any kind of certification could be a substitute teacher for up to 40 days. The bottom grid are various options that they discussed. And the one that was most problematic was the third grid, where you're going to see, or the third row, no certificate. The proposed requirement that they could teach, of course, the 40-day limit, but it could be increased to 90 days. And if it was a person who had the high school diploma level only, that there would need to be some ongoing support. And again, the issue of a person having a high school diploma became a rigorous discussion. So rigorous that, in fact, they tabled the discussion for another meeting, and that has not been determined. But I do think it's important for our members to know that this is an issue that is under serious consideration. I wanted just to make sure that you knew what some of the options were. Superintendents across the state certainly indicate that it would be beneficial to allow someone with a high school diploma with support to be able to provide services. If by any chance you have a minute or two to drop me a line, and we'll provide the link to my email at the conclusion of this video, that would be great, so we know from you and our members what you might think about a person holding solely a high school diploma providing instruction for up to 90 days. So the second item that I want to discuss was basically only an update. So there is no written material on this, but it is in regard to SAD making public the list of the first schools identified as CSI and TSI. And let me talk about what those are: comprehensive support and improvement schools, and targeted support and improvement schools under the new ESSA statute and regulations. So Senior Deputy Commissioner Joan Ebert presented this update, and it was basically informing and providing the Regents some background information that, in fact, schools and districts on the list that was going to be released, in fact, I believe they released it this morning, that the districts and schools who were identified had at least this data of about a week in advance or 2 weeks in advance, and had ample, well, let me caution the word ample, and had time to respond to the data in order to make an appeal that would perhaps influence the department's decision that there were extenuating circumstances where they may not be identified for this year. New York State is the only state that provides advanced data to the districts that may be identified. And the commissioner certainly underscored the positive nature of that advance notice. But in fact, this time around, it probably had become somewhat challenging, as some of the districts had at least some advance information to different media outlets. So Senior Deputy Commissioner Ebert then progressed to provide a little bit of background in terms of how the schools were identified. And then a discussion ensued in regard to opt-out rates. And the reason I think that this became an issue is a need for further information and further clarification about the two different pieces of the 95 participation rate in regard to the identification of schools as CSI and TSI. We could talk about this for hours, and I'm trying to be very brief, but in essence, it's that the participation rates are both used for the formulas for identification, and then separately in a first set of draft regulations, the department was going to further say that if districts had low participation rates, that there would be a series of interventions, which one option could be reduction or reducing of Title I funds to those districts with low opt-out rates. That did not make it into the final regulations, but I think there is some confusion about that. So let me make it clear. There are two ways that participation rate is important for districts to understand. It is used in various formulas for academic achievement and for student growth in the actual calculations for the 6 or 7 variables to be identified as a CSI or TSI school. And then separately, if there is a low opt-out rate, at this point, schools and districts would have to start a series of plans, needs assessment and plans to address the way to increase that participation rate. This became a source of great discussion, and that part of the agenda was probably about an hour and a half in order to get that clarified. And again, bringing everyone back to the point that this participation rate and the use of the number of students enrolled in both the state assessment and the participation rate is a federal requirement. So that is one piece of information that I think is very helpful and very current for those schools going through that TSI and CSI process. The third item that I would like to just discuss very briefly was another item on culturally responsive and sustainable education. And the reason I want to bring this up is, and it was a very good document, a very thorough document that you might want to look at, and we will provide the link at the end of this video. This was the first time, the first draft, the first time the Board of Regents had seen a framework for cultural responsiveness. Now, you remember that in 2014, there was a report that indicated that New York State had the highest percentage of segregated schools in the nation. And then through ESSA, we certainly wanted to address the need to make all of our schools culturally responsive to the great diversity of students in our state. And so for a number of years, the last couple of years at least, the Regents have been dealing with this issue. And one of the stumbling blocks was a common language base. And so in this framework, you will all see, if you get a chance to look at it, a definition of culturally responsive and sustainable schools. And in order to get to this definition, the Regents did due diligence and had a number of task forces, a number of expert panels, and that expert panel presented. It was a fine discussion, and one that you may want to look at and use this framework as you all begin or continue to improve, look at culturally responsive classrooms. So that is a very quick summary of the Board of Regents meeting, and you can find more information on this in our next news and notes, where we will provide greater depth on all of these issues as well as a few others. With the next just couple seconds remaining, I want to just bring you up to date on APPR. Very interesting. This is moving very quickly. And last week in the Assembly, a bill that was, they renumbered it to A783, was introduced on the Assembly, and it will come to the floor on January 22nd. It is expected to be passed in the Assembly. It then will go to the Senate, where it is anticipated to receive some support. And as importantly, it was included in the governor's briefing on his budget and his State of the State Union. So as more information comes to pass about this bill, and this is the bill that basically would de-link the student assessment from education evaluations. So we will be providing certainly more information as we as it comes to bear. And I know that our communication director, Michelle Hebert, will be providing timely email blasts, and we will provide more videos on this as this issue progresses. So thank you very much. Have a great day, and we will look forward to the next video.